Today is Monday, April 13th, 2026. I am the interviewer, Amy Moritz, speaking with Dr. Bridget Niland via Zoom. Bridget's athletic career began at Williamsville South High School and continued at the University of Buffalo, where she was a standout runner with the Bulls cross country and track and field teams. She won the Buffalo Marathon back to back in 1997 and 1998 and earned a top five finish at the Marine Corps Marathon in Washington. She's a member of the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame and the Western New York Running Hall of Fame, among others. Bridget has more than 25 years of experience in higher education, philanthropy, sports law, and sport tourism event management, and currently is the Vice President for Academic Affairs at Canisius University. Hi, Bridget.
Hi, Amy. It's nice to see you and talk to you.
Great to talk with you. So the question I start most of my interviews with is to tell me about a time you first remember falling in love with sports.
That's a great question. I think the first sport that I ever fell in love with was ice skating, which is gonna I don't even know if anyone's ever asked me that question. And I don't even know if anyone ever knows about my ice skating endeavors outside of my family. But I grew up in a very, very athletic family, and I was not the most athletic child, or the even athletically skilled child. My mother, who was also not really an athlete, I don't think she would ever describe herself as an athlete. She was really ahead of her time, and that she kind of just tried to find where our interests were. And so for me, it was right around the time period of like Dorothy Hamill and ice skating. I think I had a Dorothy Hamill haircut. And I really just, and so she signed me up for ice skating. And I remember she got me, we'd go to the library and we'd get books about it, ice skating. And there was this wonderful series by, I still remember the author's name. It was Jill Krementz. And it was mostly picture books, but it was like a very young gymnast, a very young ice skater, a very young, and it was mostly her photography, and she told the story of young female athletes. And this was like maybe 1979 or 1980. And I think that was really where I started. And then the town of Amherst where I grew up, they had this wonderful like skating badge program, and you could get your first badge and then your second badge and then your third badge. And I remember it was like a goal that you had to get, all five badges, and I did. And then after that, I think another sport was on my radar screen. I also think ice skating became really expensive after you got that fifth badge, and I was the youngest of seven kids. So I think my parents were glad that I moved on to a different sport. It was before girls hockey though. There wasn't, I mean, if you wanted to ice skate, then, if you fell in love with ice skating, it's not like people said, go play hockey. I do think there are some women that did have that opportunity around my age, but for me, if you wanted to ice skate, you were going to be a female ice skater. So that is the first sport I ever fell in love with.
And besides that time frame, obviously, I remember, the Dorothy Hamill kind of craze. I had a merely written haircut, so I didn't have a Dorothy Hamill haircut, but I understand where
Very similar
that's
haircuts,
from.
very similar haircuts though. So
Very
yeah.
similar, very similar. Was there something about because you said a very athletic family? So was there something about ice skating at that time when you were young that you really enjoy, like that kind of spoke to you and that you really enjoyed about it?
I think I've always been drawn to individual sports, and I don't know why, because I think I'm a very team-oriented person in many ways, although I think my teammates would definitely say I'm a little bit of an individual athlete. But um, I think it was very different. I grew up in a very, very basketball-oriented household. My father was a college basketball coach. My father played college basketball, was an All-American. His brother, like basketball and like Niland, and especially in this center part of the world, was always basketball. And I think when you're in a really big family, sometimes especially at the end, like you are trying to just find some space for yourself. And I think my mom she was such a wonderful mother in that way, in that
Mhm.
she didn't force us. I think there was pressure, but the pressure never came from my mom or my dad. But my mom she was just really great about letting each of us kind of evolve into the humans that we were, just making sure some benchmarks of kindness and compassion and seeing other humans as part of that. So I think maybe just finding something that was my own compared to everything that, and then again, I had a sister who was like a great swimmer, and I had a sister who was a track runner, and a sprinter. I had, my brother did everything. My brother is a very skilled athlete. So, I think that ice skating was a little bit of just something off the wall. I think I had an older sister that ice skated, but by the time I came to it, I think she was gone and way in college.
And so when did you find running? When was that? When did that come into your life?
I think in the most unlikely of circumstances, my father, a lifelong athlete, like always cutting edge, and I think I get this from him a little bit, loved sport as well, loved playing any type of sport. He was part of the running boom that occurred in the late 70s. So I very, very vividly remember him. I was young, and I remember him, for years, he ran in like Chuck Taylors. And there was a guy across the street from us on our street that we were living at the time, Al Shilkey, real famous kind of local runner. Um, and the two of them ordered like the very first pair of running shoes, which weren't Nikes. They were Asics Tigers. And I remember my dad like explaining, remember what they looked like, but I was not a runner. I mean, to be honest with you, I was a little bit on the chunky side most of my youth. Um, and I didn't really. I think the funny story is when I was playing soccer and at Williamsville South my freshman year. So I started off and I think it went from skating to softball, because you made me think of that. I've always skied. I love skiing, but skating to softball, and then softball to soccer, and then soccer to field hockey to rowing. Um, and I really did those, though. And then, of course, basketball was always in the background. There was always this notion that I would somehow get the gene and be able to play like everyone else in my family, which was not going to happen. Um, but I was in high school, and I was actually like, I had a ton of energy, but I remember one time we were supposed to go do like a warm-up run for freshman or soccer freshman year, and I think I'd been pulled up to varsity just because of energy and attitude, probably not necessarily skill. And I took like whoever was with me, we went to Friendlies during the run. Like that's how much I loved running when I was a freshman in high school. I will honestly tell you, and I know probably another thing I really haven't shared. There were a couple times, like I remember the guy that the family I babysat for around that same time period. I was a bit of a wise guy, and I was like, "Oh, you're going running? I bet I could beat you." And I went out and I like ran 3 miles, and he's like, "You don't run?" And I'm like, "No, not unless I'm like trying to win money from you or something." Um, but I really didn't find running until it was I would say it was to process life a little bit. Like I was in high school and you get hit those awkward years, and everyone in my family had gone away to school, and it was just me and my parents. And I can still remember I started running a little bit my freshman year just to get in better shape, I think, for basketball, who I really wanted to be a good basketball player. And it just really just never was in the cards, but I figured maybe I'd be just one of those kids who could just hustle, right? So I went for a run. So I just run like this block in my neighborhood a lot. And then the one night I don't know, I just remember I went out. This is how I remember it. Like I went out and it was before geo trackers or anything like that. And I didn't have my license, and I came back and I asked my dad to see how far I ran. And it was the summer before my sophomore year in high school. And he was like, "Bridget, you just ran 9 miles." And I was like, "Oh." And then he looked at me and he was just like, "You might be good at this. You're probably never going to be good at basketball." Like, and not like quite as harsh, but like, "Hey, you might be onto something here. Maybe you should look at it." And then so I slowly started to spin off my other sports, but I really enjoyed my other sports. So that was really hard. Not a lot of friends in my other sports. But I started with cross country in my sophomore year. And so I gave up field hockey. And then the next year I gave up indoor track. And then the next year I gave up soccer. And so by the time I was a senior, I was running all three sports. And then rowing was just a club sport, and I eventually gave up that because it conflicted. Um, but um, but yeah, but I was a latecomer to the sport. I mean, there were girls that had been doing it a lot longer for me. Like most of my competitors at Clarence and Frontier back in the day, like they had whole systems, and it's just me for a while.
And tell me about your story about going then to UB.
So actually, it's funny. I didn't really go directly to UB. I
Mm,
actually went to a school called Dickinson College, and I I was still a little bit like I wasn't a known factor in Western New York running like consistently because I mean I'd show up for cross country, but then I was gone for indoor. I'd show up, so I was kind of not and it really, it's even back then, like to really be hitting the times that I hit and you were a senior, you're a little bit late to the game. And I also was a little bit, I still don't think I had the confidence about running that I had just overall in life. And I had some really good high school coaches. I've always been so blessed with great coaches. And one of my coaches, Steve Burley, he happened to know the head coach at Dickinson College. It's actually Don Nichter. I think he might have just retired. He's a Western New York guy. He was at Lancaster, went to Niagara. And he had just been named, I think, cross country. He hadn't been there very long. And so he recruited me. I was hoping to go to the Coast Guard Academy, but I didn't get, I got like an alternative appointment or something. That's what it was back then. It's what was so competitive to get in. And they had an excellent cross country team. Like their cross country team at Coast Guard could probably beat UB's, like one of those weird Division III things where the Division III school is just as fast as a Division I school. And so certainly like there were girls from across the nation wanting to go to Coast Guard. So when I didn't get that, he introduced me and I went down to Dickinson. And Don, I really feel like I owe a lot of people a lot of credit, but Don Nichter, I kind of had a blow up freshman year. Like I dropped a minute and a half off my 5K time. I went like, sub or right around like sub 10:30 in the 2000. And then he taught me how to run the 10,000. The other thing that happened before I went away to Dickinson was I connected up with a group of women here in Buffalo. Vicki Mitchell, she won't remember it at the time because I could barely see her when we did our workout runs, but it was Vicki Mitchell. It was a woman by the name of Jeanette Bonrui. Vicki and Jeanette had run together at Amherst. There were some other women, some older, Joni Zirkelbach. Joni was a long time, really great, like women's runner in the area. I think she moved to Florida a long time ago and I've lost track of her. But I trained with them over the summer and I started doing Jack Daniels, who was Vicky's coach at Cortland, some of his workouts. And I mean, I put in the miles and I went down to Dickinson and I qualified for nationals and I won conference championships and I was running competitive Division I times. And so I wasn't on a scholarship. And then I got my tuition bill for my second year. I was actually living at Dickinson during the summer training for triathlons. I stayed down there. I came home. I love Dickinson. But I mean, I was responsible for school. And I went from having to pay $1,500 to like $10,000 for school. And I was like, I don't have $10,000. I want to take loans out. So I made a really difficult decision to move, to find a different school. And so I looked at Canisius UB in Syracuse. And the short story of this is technically going from Division III to Division I. Back in the day, you couldn't accept money. So Canisius and Syracuse were not all that interested and they couldn't give me a scholarship. But UB didn't know the rules yet, really, because they were in the process of moving to Division I. And so I showed up there under the auspices of getting a hefty scholarship, and about 6 weeks into it was informed that I couldn't get it because of an NCAA rule, which kind of started this other passion in my life for sport law, because I was pretty angry about that. But good to put your anger somewhere in life. And so I put it into trying to change some of those rules, which we eventually did.
Okay, I did know your origin story with like your passion for sport law, so we're going to get to that in a second. But when you mentioned training with the women before you went away your freshman year in the Western Europe community, can you just talk a little bit about what that community was like? That not the running community, but then also specifically some of the women, and what was that group like? Was it competitive but supportive? Take me a little bit through that a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the most supportive person I had and I'll tell you this story because, I had this really great senior year and I was running fast. And I should have easily qualified for states my senior year outdoor in the 3000. And I still remember it's like one of those, like still makes you kind of the pit still in your stomach and how many years ago was it? Um, but I was winning with like, 2 or 3 laps to go. And I mean, it was a hot day and I probably didn't drink enough. And I collapsed, like I didn't collapse. I finished, but I didn't qualify. And I remember, and you think about it now, like, gosh, if this happened today, like poor Joni Zerkelbach might have gotten arrested, not by my parents, but by some parent. But the next day, she showed up at my house. She showed up at my house in Williamsville. And Joni she was a teacher at Cheektowaga, maybe Depew, and I mean, she showed up at my house and she gave me like, I still have the printouts, and it was just all about like, put it behind you. Like it happened, put it behind you. Like, and just like that was so awesome, right? Like that she just showed up and she was just like, and take a couple weeks off and meet me out at the ridge. And I trained a lot with her, and there were some guys in that group. Mike Masters, who runs cross training athletics, he was in that group. He was a coach at Cheektowaga at the time. The other one, I'll be honest with you, I like really had no business training with those girls. So I think like, I kind of like showed up and did my best. Jeanette Bonrui, who was done with her eligibility at that point. So I think that you're in a different phase when you're done with your eligibility. So Jeanette knew Joni Zerkelbach and those guys. So that's kind of how I got into that little group. But at the time, I mean, listen, I those relationships were fundamental, but I have to say that I think what I learned from some of the folks, like when I think back to Vicky at that time, like Vicky eventually would become a really close, dear friend of mine. But at that time, I mean, listen, she was going into her senior year, like at Cortland. She had won a national champion. Like those girls from Cortland, Judy Arlington was another one that became Judy Sparks Arlington, or she was Judy Sparks, and then she became Judy Arlington. Like these were women that, I mean, they had gone to nationals and like won. I had gone to nationals. They had gone to nationals and won. I think also, Amy, at that time, I think I don't know, this sounds a little, it sounds a little, I think looking back on it, I may have also been somewhat of a catalyst for the younger girls behind me at my school. So like, I would say like just nothing, I wouldn't want to make it out to be much, but like, hey, like I'd be like, I'm going to the Ridge, do you want to go? And there were a couple young women that South didn't really have. They always had one or two really good runners, but they didn't necessarily have a program as much. And I think that was just because there were so many successful sports programs like in field hockey and all the other sports that happened. But I think that so Joni and Jeanette, who were, again, they weren't competing anymore. So I think they could be a little bit more instructive and nurturing to me than maybe some of those girls. And I can't even remember who else was in there, but Vicky was one of them. Probably a bunch of girls from Amherst, honestly, because they had a really good program at the time. But they, I just went and like, hey, I'm just going to try to hang with these girls at the Ridge or wherever they were running. The but the women who were kind of had moved on to more recreational running, I think they were kind of at a space and time where they could kind of, ask you more about your running rather than worry that. And I'll be honest with you, I became the person I was, in my college years, it's all business. And, for Vicky, it was all business. You had pressure, you had miles to grind out. But the women that were older, and then I do think my friends that were younger than me, and Judith and I, of course, became very, very good friends. And she later joined me at UB and was always the more talented runner than I was. I always still feel bad that sometimes my name's mentioned, like really, like not the same thing. Same thing with Vicky. Like we all were good at our own things, but like those two clearly were more talented than I was.
I want to ask you a couple more questions about running, and then I want to get back to your career trajectory. Then, with a little bit post college, you are still running. Like, was there? I guess first of all, was there a point when you were running that you decided that I really, your dad kind of pointed out that this might be your strength, but was there a point that did you fall in love with it at any
Oh,
point, or
yeah.
what was your relationship like with it? Like, do you remember when that happened?
I would probably say that same summer, and I would probably say, like And I think you wrote a great, or I like it was you, like when we talked about when I was going into the Hall of Fame, like running just became this like trusted thing in my life that no matter what was happening, no matter who was in and out of my house, because we have this big family and I have nieces and nephews, and I mean, just like all of this stuff. And, like whether you were in or out of your friend group or whether the boy liked you or he didn't like you, like we always used to joke, like with Judith and some other girls on my team, it's like, running never says they'll call, and don't, like that was always like running never leaves you out when you want to be left in. Like it was all up to you. And I think having those friendships with people that were a little bit older than me, and I think I started going out to the Ridge and running with people that were like career, like they, I just bumped, I'm still friends with a lot of them that they were like young attorneys or young family, like I got into checkers, and I would show up to checkers workouts and I met Becky Hoyer and Bob Carroll and they became my friends and they were like significantly older than me, but we had the same interests. And so I think I did fall in love with it. And I think I fell in love a little bit with the community because it's just this wonderful community. And on the flip side of things, when I started to have a family and was only sleeping 4 hours a night, it I couldn't do it anymore. And that was also like a little bit of grieving a relationship. Like it just became something that I couldn't do at the same level and I did other things, but I really did love it. And I will just say that I don't I think a lot of female athletes feel like this, like it made me feel strong in a point of my life where I really needed to feel strong. Um, I think, when you're a college distance runner, it probably also gave me some really bad habits of body image and weight, and I had to work through those too. I think thankfully, I think we're a little bit past that, and I'm really glad that the girls get to be taught only to be strong. So I don't want to make it like it was all this super positive thing. I think that would be really disingenuous to the sport. I think that if you were a runner in the first phase of Title IX, distance runner, I think that you know, we were a little bit of guinea pigs in terms of what exactly is performance training, what is strength training, what are stress fractures, what is eating properly. I think it's so wonderful to see that I think in a large part we've gotten young women more information since then. But I think all of us that were in that era, we all were a little bit of guinea pigs and test cases of how you find the right balance to be the fastest runner you can be.
Mhm. And let's talk about like marathoning and distance running after that. So not everyone keeps running right after college. Was there a point when when did you know like that distance was what you or distance running or trying or doing a marathon? When did that bug kind of hit you?
I think because I knew that, I didn't necessarily had talent, but I had a lot of strength. And so it was pretty common. And Coach Barry, Dick Barry's, you know, so hugely important in my life. He was the coach at UB. And I joined him for my sophomore year. Um, he pretty quickly realized that and that I was, from this big family that you had to demonstrate, what's your thing and kind of have a little bit of an edge, which, could make me a great teammate or not a great teammate at times. And there's some truth to that. Um, Really competitive, but he used to be able to kind of say to me, like, listen, you got to run you got to run the half mile in the 4x8. Then I need you to be in the 3. Then I need you to scoop up some points in the 5. And, I might throw you in the 10 on Friday night. And it was just like, okay, I think I began to realize like, okay, this is like, I'm probably going to really, I want to do a half. I want to do a marathon. I want to do those things. Again, it was also some of the people I met with because Joni Zirkelbach was also a triathlete. And like, this is before triathlete was like a thing or cool. And we used to go out on the bike. We'd bring our bikes. Mike Masters, Joni Zirkelbach, and I would do like long runs at the Ridge. Jeanette too, Jeanette Bonrui. She passed away too, and I have to just say, may she rest in peace. She was such a dear soul. She passed away young, wonderful. She was an All-American at Ithaca, outstanding runner from Amherst High School. But she was a triathlete. She was like, and seeing those women be triathletes. So I got into triathlons like junior year of high school. Love triathlons. And so I think that always kind of put in the back of my head. Coach Barry didn't want me doing triathlons for a while. I understood that. It builds up your legs. It builds up your, like, I became very, like, big in ways that probably didn't help me be fast. and some of the half mile and mile stuff. Um, but I think I knew that I'd always go back to it. And I knew that the marathon was something I wanted to do. I took a semester off of running. I ran unattached 19 spring of 94. That was my first marathon. I was working for Jack Quinn, a congressman in Washington, D.C. So I took that semester. I don't know, I was away. I was in some sort of internship program. And I told Coach Barry, like, all right, I'm going to train for my first marathon. And he was good with it. And he's just like, just don't get hurt, which I didn't. And I ran the first marathon in 94. Really miserable experience, a cold, but I liked it. And so I always knew that I would get back to it in law school. That was always the plan. The plan was not to ever like run as fast as I think I ended up running at some of those distances. But again, I credit Bob. That's when I really became friends with Vicky Mitchell, Bob Carroll, and Becky Hoyer. And Becky is an incredible runner. And she ran at George Mason, was from Niagara County growing up. And I just was really able to train. And I also think not worried about school, not worried about that. Like I could just run for the sake of running, not worried about protecting my position on the team, which you had to. And like I needed to protect my scholarship. So
Right. And then just the Buffalo Marathon. Take me through that experience of winning the first time and then coming back and defending that title, actually.
yeah, and I was in law school for the whole time. So it was like it wasn't like the best way to spend your first couple, but I always it was kind of nice. It gave me some real structure to it. It was also this period of time. So I think for my early marathons, my law school marathons, I worked a lot with Bob Ivory. It was kind of before I met post law school and when like Buffalo Runner of the Year and the high finishes at like Disney and Marine Corps. That was more Bob Carroll, Becky Hoyer, Vicky Mitchell's training helping me. The Buffalo Marathons was Bob Ivory. And he would meet me at UB's track and he would just put me through these brutal workouts. There was another woman, Amy Donner. She had run for Buff State, and I met her on campus, and she was a speedster, and she was getting her PhD in biology. She now works in Boston in medical research. Still in touch with her a little bit. She would meet me and put me through, like, just be my training partner and on that stuff. And then I just, I think Buffalo is a wonderful running community, and there were some great women, but I would say for the Buffalo Marathon, like that was where my network of, you know, guy runners, because when you're trying to run three sub three, there's not Buffalo at that point in time. There weren't a lot of women that could run that. There was a woman, Kristen Shiswal, I think she's Kristen White eventually. She and I trained a lot. She was she was a really good runner. She went on to be like, she was phenomenal. She moved to Syracuse. And I remember I had gotten out of it a little bit, but she was still in the thick of it. And she's gone to Olympic trials and was a real good triathlete, stuff like that. She was getting her pharmacy degree at UB. So we just connect up. And I do think, to be honest with you, like we were competitive, Kristen and I were, and she wanted to beat me. I wanted to beat her. It was all good. And I think that definitely helped winning those two marathons because she was in one of them. And she was strong, and she was someone to put my eyes on and go for. But I also had some really great running partners. Bob, JP Kennedy, Bob Moore, like these guys that were also trying to break three. I will tell you, yeah, the first time it was great. It was easy. Winning back to back, that's harder. Winning back to back when you're trying to get ready for the bar exam and everything else. But I really wanted to prove to myself that I could win it twice, back to back. I think being able to do things back to back is like, I think the second time is 10 times more challenging than the first. So I think showing up a second time when the pressure's there, that's good stuff. That's fun trying to do that. Not that it really stinks when you miss the mark, but at least it's a really big challenge.
Yeah. And you mentioned a lot of the like male training partners and other, male runners and certainly that still have great male. One of the great things I think about a marathon and running is that it's all on the same course, right? You're all doing the same thing. How supportive, obviously you had men that were supportive at the time. You mentioned there weren't a lot of women necessarily running the marathon in Buffalo. Was the running community at large pretty still supportive of more women coming in?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's
Yeah, it was
that's my
it was
feel, but I wanted your
amazing. The
experience.
running community in Buffalo, and even the running community, I was in DC for like 18 months. And like the friendships I made in DC were just like that's why I said like when my life got to the point where I couldn't do it all and I had to make choices and running was the thing that part like not being part of that community. I think my husband will tell you like it was sad, but I mean, I wouldn't make a different decision. It was very clear. Running community in Indianapolis too. So my fastest times were in Indy right before I started my family. Um, and I made wonderful friends in Indy through the running community. Matter of fact, the young lady who came back and won the marathon one of those years was one of my training partners. I'm like, hey, I can't get back to Buffalo, but they have a great marathon. And she came and she won the marathon, and she was one of my training partners out in Indy. Really nice young lady. Always a great community. I just think, and I will also say though, but like really low tech at the time, and I would say that was the one thing that makes me a little sad when I re-entered it a little bit. It got, I was like, oh, we don't need all this stuff. Like I remember for a brief time in like 2000, probably about 2012 to 2014, I did some marathons and just half marathons. I didn't do another marathon. 5 kids, it takes a toll on your body. So like half marathon was good. But the um that's when like watches started to talk to you and you had all this like and I was just like I'm like wait what just like I've been gone like 7 years and everything's like all geared up and fancy and that's fine. I'm not judgy. It was just for me, like the beauty of running was you needed a good, decent pair of shoes and a sports bra in our case, and then you pretty much could do it. And I get it. It became, like a lot of things, there's a lot of things you can sell. And certainly I have bought into some of them. So, um, and I have my wireless headphones and all that, but for a long time you just needed that and a supportive community. And I do think Buffalo has one of the most wonderful running communities. I know now because my one son is part of it, and it's just great for him to kind of see the same. It hasn't changed, and some of the people are still the same people, which is awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It is such a great community, the running community. So supportive. A lot of places. I think it's pretty
Yeah.
much it. You had mentioned your time in Indy, and so that's kind of a little nice segue into talking about your sports law and your kind of your career path. So, you went to law school. Was that going back to that scholarship issue and that
Yeah, that was
NCAA was that really kind of what piqued you a little bit?
Yeah, I honestly, that was never the intent though. I went to law school to go in the FBI. That was why I started law school. I think obviously you have life experiences that change what you want to do with your life. But I still never really, and I think that's why today, like as much as I love college sports, I'm not in college sports. College sports was always something that I grew up with, that I knew a lot about, that I had a lot of family in that business. So I understood it the way I guess you would understand like a guy who, like a family who's like a plumber or a butcher, like, I mean, it's just something you knew. Um, and, but I really, like, I have to tell you, like, I just started, I'm like, what is this NCAA thing? And like, why do they care about me? I'm just like a distance runner. I'm not like Cliff Scott, who was the quarterback for UB. I wasn't
Mhm.
like, I just, and all of a sudden it was like these rules seemed really draconian. And I think I was mad. And I did have a fair amount. I mean, my parents really were awesome parents and they helped me as much as they could. But I mean, school was expensive and that it wasn't like a given that your family would, subsidize anything with school back then. It was like some families had it and some families didn't. And what, you figured it out. So, I just was really, really bothered by it. And I think the guy who had to tell me, Mike Gentile, who was the athletics director, he became the associate athletics director at UB, like my first year there. He's the one who figured out, like, we have this person on scholarship. She can't be on scholarship. He offered me a work study job. And so I started working in his office with the NCAA compliance, and he had been a college athlete and he had gone to law school. And so I kind of did it as a means to an end. And then there were, again, a wonderful woman leader, Emily Ward. I think she recognized that maybe I had an acumen for it, and she nominated me to be on the NCAA Student Athlete Advisory Committee, which at that point was like a national thing. And there were only 25 student athletes across the country, and somehow I got picked. And I spent 4 years with that group. I spent 2 as chair. I met some wonderful, really bright, talented, they were all phenomenal athletes. I mean, one of them, Tanya Hughes, was like a 1988 Olympian, and she was my mentor. Um, they were all really bright too. Really turned the academic kind of light on me, really started just looking into things closer. And by the time I left law school, I had done some really cool things at the national level and had like been the student athlete rep on the board of on the management council for the NCAA, traveled to Spain, traveled throughout the country, represented the student athletes at big conventions, really knew the rule book because of my job with Mike. But I didn't want to work in it. And I took a job with Judge Curtin, John Curtin in federal court, big runner. Totally, that was a total runner thing. Like I was a runner, he was a runner. You know, it was great. I'm not embarrassed about that. I don't know if people wanted me to be embarrassed about it. I was like, no, I'm smart. I just can run. And he likes the fact that I run. Who cares? Like sometimes it's because you're related to someone. Sometimes it's like whatever. But he was great. He was wonderful because it was great to have a boss during that time period to be like, hey, you're gonna get your run in today. And I'd be like, yeah, I'll get it in. Thanks. I need to get this to you first, you know, because I need to get this decision to you first. But he was super and really good. He was very Title IX person too, Judge. We did some Title IX stuff together. But I didn't go into college sports originally. And then I went from Judge Curtin's office to the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. And I always tell my students, you know, make sure you take a job that you want, not that other people want you to want. And I would say that that was the job at the Justice Department. Really awesome people, again, so supportive, like came out and cheered for me for all the stuff. But I didn't really want that job. I didn't see that as like how I was going to use my law degree. And then as happenstance, some of the people that I worked with at the NCAA took on leadership roles. And a few of them were like, do you want to come and work for us? And I did. I just decided that, you know what, that was my groove, doing regulatory work for college athletics. I understood it. I understood how it worked. I was not afraid to challenge it. And I was surprised they wanted to hire me because I had spent 4 years just challenging them. But I did. And those are some of my favorite people. And I learned so much from my time with the NCAA. I was with them 5 years in Indianapolis. And then my parents got older and became ill. And I wanted to be closer to home to somehow be helpful to my sister, who was their primary caregiver. And we moved home and I worked for the NCAA for another 10 years. As a consultant during the non-academic part of the year because I accepted a tenure track role at Damon University.
When you were at the NCAA, like you mentioned, like you would challenge them. What did you see about women's voices and women's leadership in the college sports setting?
You know, I think I was there during a bright spot. I don't know if I still have some wonderful friends there doing amazing things, and they say nothing but, you know, they're the ultimate professionals as they always have been and always will be. I really feel badly sometimes that they are not portrayed positively because some of the stuff, I mean, you got to always remember this is college sports is run by college presidents. That's who runs college sports. They are the end decision maker. People might think it's commissioners. It's getting that way a little bit more because of the way that college sports have changed. But college sports has been primarily run by college presidents. And sometimes there's not enough female college presidents out there, right? But they were the women that were there. Judy Sweet, amazing role model for me. And I'll tell you, I had some tough times where I did challenge people. And at the NCAA, the people that always had my back were my female colleagues, almost all of them to a T. I'm very grateful for all of them. Even after I left, there were a group of them that were actually college commissioners that really kind of said, why did Bridget, why did she leave? Why couldn't, because I had 2 children at the time and pregnant with a third. And I remember getting a call from like the chief of staff of the president's office and saying like, listen, I got to call you because these women want to know why you left and like whether it was because the environment wasn't supportive. And, listen, it was corporate America. Like corporate America wasn't supportive. It wasn't the NCAA. You can't take a 70-hour-a-week job and make it a 40-hour-a-week job. and they need it to be 70 hours, and that's fine. But if I need it to be 40 hours, then we're obviously not going to be able. But they carved out a job for me that was 48 hours, that was 40 hours a week. It wasn't high profile, but it's extremely important. And one of my people that I worked really close with and have a pretty decent professional relationship with is Greg Sankey, who I joke is now running college sports because he's just commissioner of the SEC. So, he was a younger commissioner when I got a chance to work with him. And Kevin Lennon, who was great and supportive of me as well, just in different ways. But, the female friendships that I have made through the NCAA have stood the test of time. And I am so grateful for that. And it was a predominantly female staff when you looked at legislation and membership and all that stuff. It was great. And a lot of them have gone on to be hugely successful. And some of them, like me, decided to do other things, but we all credit the NCAA. They were great about leadership development. And whether you're a student athlete or a staffer, that was something that will always be incredibly grateful for, and have encouraged my kids to be student athletes so that they can get a little bit of that.
Talking about, being a student athlete, I mean, you had academic roles, like you mentioned, Damon, you're at Niagara, now at Canisius, a nonprofit sector with Project Play too, in Western New York. How did your experiences as an athlete, both student athlete, and then also the discipline it takes to train for marathons and be a distance runner? How do you think that impacted, or did that impact your career? How did that play a role at all?
I mean, sports gave me everything. Like I think unless we have like a pristine upbringing, I think from a very young age, whether we realize it or not, and I've tried to remember this as I've parented my kids with my husband, like I think, people are just trying to figure out how they fit in the world. And for me, from a very early age, I knew that people knew my dad or knew my uncle or knew my brothers because of sport. Like sport was a vehicle of change for my own family. But for my father being good at basketball, he would have stayed and worked, and he probably would have dropped out of high school, which again, nothing wrong with that at that time. Those families went on to be successful too. But like that changed the trajectory. This place, Canisius, changed the trajectory of my father's life. And as a result, it changed the trajectory of my life. And so I just didn't know how sports would play a role for me, but I knew it played a role. And I easily identified, like, even though, like I said, I was a little bit on the Husky side, like I was the kid who was out playing all day, and I wasn't good at every sport, but I wanted to try it. I was never very good at like the gymnastics things, but my sister was, and watched her do very well in those things. Sport was always where I got my confidence and strength. I did not get it from the classroom originally. I was not, and I think, we all have imposter syndromes of certain things. It wasn't, I think, now people tell me like, wow, like you figure things out really quick. I always say I get clever a lot. Maybe that's, like you're clever. I got that a lot from teachers growing up, and not necessarily a great way. Like, you're clever. I wish you could study as much as you try to be clever with me, Miss Niland. But I think Chuck Godfrey, who was one of my track coaches, I give him a ton of the making the connection between Bridget. If you can run the miles that you run and do the workouts that you do, you can sit down and do your math homework. You can sit down and study for chemistry. You can sit down. Words and history and stuff like that came very easy to me. And I think that's why I gravitated to law and that. The quantitative stuff was always a little bit more challenging to me. I don't think God, not everyone gets everything. But he challenged me to view myself as a strong person overall, not just as a strong athlete. And he really lit the fire that, I mean, I bumped into him. He became my coach, like cross country. He was just my cross country coach. He changed. I mean, coaches change the trajectory of people's lives for good or for bad. And I'm just really lucky to have been a person that has always had great coaches. He changed my life because I was like a merit roll student my first 2 years of high school. And, then I was in a completely different trajectory my final 2 years of high school. And I loved to learn to write, and I always loved to read, but like I just, running helped me. The stronger I got in that, the stronger I believed. And then that allowed me, Amy, so this is a great point to your question. sometimes that what I experienced is what a lot of athletic young people experience, especially young men. Young women these days, like they got to be it all. That wasn't how it was when I was growing up. Like you were like either considered a jock or considered a cheerleader. Like there were far fewer expectations of young women. There were far few expectations of young women. So that's a good and a bad, right?
Mhm.
Um, but um, you know, having that experience that I sat with, especially when I became an educator, really at Damon, oh God, I love that time when I was a assistant professor and associate professor, and the classes of young people that I got a chance to work with. I just, it was a great time. But there was a lot of young athletes that at Damon, and a lot of the young men too. Was like, listen, man, like, don't tell me you can sit there in a gym full of people with everybody wondering whether you're going to make this foul shot. That is so much pressure. You have the strength and tenacity. If you can sit through that, then you can sit through, make it a game, make it a challenge. And so I really love working with students. I love working with the kids who are already motivated and already challenging. You need to put stuff out of their way. You just need to keep putting the barriers for them to hop over, and because they want to do it. But I really love working with a young person who's finding themselves, who's beginning to realize like all the different gifts that they have when they may have only realized that they just had this one set of gifts. And it's like when you can make those connections for them, like that's just the greatest thing about education in my difference. It's great to help a smart kid be smarter. It's wonderful to find a kid who doesn't think that they're smart and give them that ability to appreciate their intelligence.
Oh gosh, I love that. Yeah, kind of along those lines with project play and nonprofit work and with accessibility and trying to help um, more people, more young people get the benefit of sport. Just what during your time with that organization, what did you see in Buffalo, and what surprised you that maybe you didn't, or were you surprised about anything that you learned during your time there?
So I think like there, like a lot of people, my story with sport has many chapters to it. And I think if we were to pivot from kind of the college sport space to the equity in sport, it was number one, having children of my own. Number two, becoming athletics director at Damon, which was something, I was part of a team of people and I was the regulatory person. I was dealing with the NCAA. I was that transition and Damon was an NAIA school. They moved to an NCAA school. That's what I did for a living for the NCAA. So I got permission to work with Damon and move them, help them through. And, as things happened, I became athletics director. And at the same time, around that same time, I was also doing some work with Mary Wilson and Western New York Girls in Sport. And she always had that equity mindset, right? Like she always appreciates, she still does. She's such a wonderful human being. So grateful to have her as somebody that has been part of my life. It was coming back to Buffalo and meeting these group of women, like women. I mean, I know you've done something like the group of women out of Western New York Girls in Sports, like that's a whole nother chapter. Like I've met all these really cool women who were like me, who were so grateful for being involved in sports, we're all out there doing our sports still. That's not where our competitive juices were flowing. Um, but meeting her and kind of seeing what she was starting to see, like, hey, like not all girls are getting to be involved in sports. Like that equity issue really first propped up most notably with young girls, like who got the opportunity to play sports. And I went to Williamsville schools. I mean, I had endless opportunities. I didn't have to pay for them. My parents wouldn't have paid for them. That was happening at the same time as I was an athletics director, sitting in front of a lot of young people who had been playing the same sport their whole life. And they got to me and their coaches, and there was a story there. Like there was a story of, I'm tired. There was a story of, my body hurts. There was a story of like, so that whole industrial youth sport complex and who got to be a part of it and what it does to kids. That's where my research as a professor went from college sports, college gambling, what was the future of college sports going to look like? And it was almost just like I've been having those conversations for like 12 years and the conversations were like always the same. And I was just kind of like, nobody's listening here. We're just going to keep going. And I'm not surprised where we are right now based on what was going on in 2010 and 12. but curiosity to me, I was like, kind of like, and everyone started writing about that. So I really wanted to start looking at youth sport in general and like how it was forming young people. And so I went back and got my PhD. And that was my research agenda with that. And I looked a lot at how youth sport informed college choice and college trajectory. And in that is when I realized like there's a whole big equity issue here. Like it's you no longer determinant on scholastic sports. I thought it was just for basketball and soccer, but it's everywhere. The only sport that's not impacted by the inequities is really football. Football, that's what my research told me. Like if everyone could be like scholastic football, then that would be if every sport was treated that way because it's in the schools and you have access to it. The they often do like they have the weight room, they have that. All these other sports have become club sports and not everyone gets to play them and we're missing who knows who's to say that the 1987 Bridget Niland with her socioeconomic background and who's to say that I would have ended up with the opportunities I had. And that really fueled my desire to work with Project Play and start something in Buffalo that could work with that.
That's one of the things I noticed in and listening to a lot of the interviews I've done with women that grew up in Western New York is two things. One, almost all of them had a parent who played sports. So if you didn't have a parent who played sport, I don't know that you would know how to access that at the time. And there was an era where like community rec programs or playground park or like that was where it they were exposed to things before they even got to or like a organized. I mean, it was organized obviously because it was rec, but it was cost effective if there was a cost to it, or you were playing playground ball at Humboldt Park or something like that.
The last thing I did, so because I've pivoted off Project Play and some of the work there, because the job I have now is big enough all on its own in modern higher education. So I had to pare down on stuff. But the last kind of thing I did nationally on this is I went and talked to it was the what is that called? The blank, and I'll send it to you later. But it's basically the big lobbying group. It used to for sport in the United States, and they do this team sport. The team sport meeting each year in Indianapolis, and it was hosted by the National Federation for High School Sports. Um, and based on my research and based on my experience at Project Play, I sat on a panel with someone, all these folks trying to sell. And to me, it's not what everyone wants to hear. I don't think it's what Dick's Sporting Goods wants to hear. I don't think it's what AdPro Sports wants to hear. Because remember, in the past 25 years, as we've seen we've seen the decline somewhat of scholastic sports overall, especially in our region, especially in urban areas. Like the number of schools that aren't fielding a girls basketball team in Section 6, that's a little, it's not all, there's a lot of pockets where you're not seeing young girls participate anymore. Because of club sports, because of AAU, because of the 365-day a year. There's a lot of people that are making, I'm not a popular person in the sports world sometimes. I never have been. There are a lot of people that are making a lot of money from the privatized club youth sports model. And there's a lot of kids losing out because of that. And I really feel very strongly about it, but I think I kind of came at crossroads of, Dick's may be great about, youth sports matter and stuff like that, but like Dick's sports have definitely benefited from the private youth sports model. AdPro in their player packs, wonderful people, but AdPro in their player packs, like you didn't need a player pack. I didn't need a player pack when I played Amherst travel or Amherst town, whatever, tourney soccer. I went to the town youth program. They gave me a bag that had the uniform that some girl wore last year, which may gross people out, but washed it, went and played in it. And my parents didn't have to pay. I think the last year my daughter played travel soccer, I think we wrote a check for like, I don't know, $2,500. And that didn't cover the player pack. It didn't cover travel. It didn't cover that. And yeah, you need two incomes to foster that, or you're not playing it. And I don't know if I don't know if we're set up economically to really change that unless we put more money in scholastic sports. I think that we should take more money from the sports gambling fund that's going on in New York State, and I think it should go directly to school districts, and school districts should use it to either build club sports for those, we already had it like take Orchard Park. They have enough money to run their sports programs. They don't have enough roster spots for the kids that want them. So they need a secondary. They needed a club system. But then you look at something like a Cheektowaga, well, they need to use that money to maybe do some of the programming, performance stuff that these other kids in the well-funded school districts are getting privately from their parents. Like, just give it to the athletic departments and say it's for to increase your participation numbers, however you want to use it. And those athletics directors will get it to where it needs to. But that we need to refortify scholastic sports and move away from the privatized model, which it's like telling UB they need to add lacrosse and ice hockey, and it's not a popular stance, but it's based on my knowledge what we should be doing.
My last question for you is, what does Title IX mean to you?
Title IX means seeing value in hearing young women and letting them be what they want to be, not what the marketplace wants them to be or needs them to be. It's about seeing our young women and letting them paint on their own blank canvases, and not, that's what Title IX was. And I hope it doesn't get destroyed or leveraged in ways to help the hijacking of Title IX and using it to divide young women is heartbreaking for those of us who benefited so greatly from it. Those are my viewpoints. People may not share them, but I'm pretty secure in them that it's a good thing and we need to protect it. And the moms out there, just make sure your daughters have the same opportunities that I did. They need more, not less. That's it.
All right. Well, Bridget, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Amy. You're awesome.